Hello, I'm Mark Pougatch and this is Series 2 of Inside the Tour from Audi, the Ashes of 86-87. We should say at the outset, as well as an A-list cast and lots of 80s music, there's some drinking on this tour as well, and hence on the series, which is all good news because we've teamed up with Beer 52 to give you an amazing offer, a free case of 8 unique craft beers to enjoy while you're listening. Just visit www.beer52.com/inside to claim this fantastic offer. Beer 52 is the world's largest beer club. Each month, members are sent a case with a different theme. It might be Belgian or even Korean, who knows? And you get a magazine and snacks as well. And if you don't like dark beer, just choose the light option. And you can pause or cancel at any time. To claim your free case, all you need to do is go to beer52.com/inside and pay the postage of just £5.95. Then settle back and come with me for chaos, confusion and a bit of cricket. It's Inside the Tour. Cricket history is full of heroes in 2 categories: superstars of the game, the predictable heroes, and those who creep up on us, the unlikely ones. As this Ashes tour of 86-87 moves to Perth for the second test, it's time to meet a couple in that second category.
My name is Chris Broad and I was selected as an opening batsman, a left-handed opening batsman for Nottinghamshire with what some people describe as an awkward-looking stance, but it felt comfortable for me.
My name is Jack Richards. I was wicketkeeper batsman, carrying the drinks, keeping everybody happy. I'd basically given up. I'd started studies to become an optician. I came from Cornwall and left Cornwall at an early age to join Surrey. And I'd never really finished my schooling. I started my A-levels, but only had a wad of O-levels. Bob Taylor did all the test matches and I did a few one-day games. So I'd been on that fringe all the time and I still thought I was still playing well. And I didn't really get any discussion. Nobody came to talk to me. I thought, well, that's it. Let's work on my future outside of cricket. So when I went to Australia, I had half of my gear was actually still study books. After talking to my wife, I said, look, I have to give it up. I have to just go and enjoy myself. So really, my aspirations are gone. I'm focusing on studies to become an optician.
When I was left out in 84, I was hugely disappointed because we'd played West Indies and my last test innings was against Sri Lanka where I'd got 86 at Lords. For the next couple of summers I was still, or 18 months, I was left out in the cold. But there was always, at the end of an English summer, there was discussion in the dressing room as to who might be picked and who might not be picked. And no one really saw that Graham Gooch wasn't going to go on the tour. I saw Graham obviously as a terrific opening batsman, but to be selected on the tour, I was pretty selfishly, I suppose, thinking what a fantastic opportunity this is for me to get back into the England team and score some runs.
It gave me that chance. At the end of the day, it gave me an opportunity to possibly play test match cricket. Coming from a lowly guy in Cornwall, from way out west, I knew I could compete. The only thing is if I would get the chance to make runs, or the chance to show my ability, because in my previous tour, I showed my ability once and I was parked on the sideways for them to let the main keeper make sure I don't get another opportunity because I was pretty determined, although there's absolutely no way I expected it to turn out as it did turn out.
Now that's an understatement. Jack Richards and Chris Broad, about to play one of the matches of their lives. We'll pick up their stories in just a minute. After England's shambolic first month of the tour, they arrive in Perth buoyed by their emphatic first test triumph. And those inside the tour had spotted a change in the culture, a change in attitude.
I was an observer on the sidelines, and it's interesting to see what happens to winning teams and losing teams.
Author Frances Edmonds, her husband, England spinner Phil.
There are all sorts of reasons why you're losing. I mean, if there are unplayable balls on unplayable pitches from unbelievably great fast bowlers, that's one thing. The fact that nobody's turning up on time to the team meeting, or everybody's missing the bus, or nobody can be bothered to go to the practice nets, that's another. And my observation, the difference between the two teams, effectively the same group of men, was that in the West Indies, because people get disheartened and demotivated, then kind of the concept of discipline and responsibility goes by the wayside. So what started to happen in Australia was it was a disgrace to be late for the team bus, it was a disgrace to be late for nets, it was a disgrace to turn up late for a team meeting, it was a disgrace to bowl wide, it was a disgrace to miss a catch, it was a disgrace to give your wicket away cheaply. Everything started to gel. What makes those things happen? If one could identify that and bottle it, you have actually got the secret of success in a bottle.
So they allowed, very sensibly I would say, leeway to the likes of myself, Botham, other senior players, I'm David Gower, to be themselves. And they gave the people making their first visit to Australia on an Ashes tour every help they wanted. So there was this mix and match management which evolved through the course of that tour. And if Mike Gatting looks back at that tour, he will say that was probably the most sensible thing he did.
My name's Mike Gatting. I was very fortunate to be captain of the Ashes series in 1986-7. One of the things that I always vowed that if I got in charge as captain of England, I'd make sure that all the youngsters felt they were part of the team, because I remember my first trip in 78, I just felt sort of out on the edge and not part of the team.
What they realised through that first month was that actually you cannot have, and this is one of my great beliefs anyway, you cannot have a sort of one-size-fits-all management of an England cricket team anywhere in the world, let alone Australia.
And so I was very aware that this was going to be a hell of a long trip, 4.5 months, and we couldn't lose anybody on the way through. Because I did say to them, I said, I want you three to stay well away from the youngsters, don't take them out drinking, and make sure that, if you're going to do something, just stay out of the press.
All very well, but this was England on tour. And the U3 he mentions, Alan Lamb, David Gower and Ian Beefy Botham, famously liked a tour. Boy, they liked a tour.
I had a chat with Beefy and said, look, mate, for the first month, what I'd like you to do is when we're netting is to look after the youngsters in the nets, have a chat with them, talk to them about the Ashes, do your own practice, be seen to be doing what you have to. And I said, after that, I said, you tell me when you want to play them before the test matches or not at all, and we'll go from there. And he looked at me and went, are you serious? I said, yeah. I said, well, nobody's ever said that to me before. And I said, really? I said, OK, well, fine. Well, I've done it. So are you happy with that? He said, mate, that's just fantastic.
You have to trust responsible professional players to know what they need. If you'd said to me, right, you're not having a great time, we'd like you to have a 2-hour net, I would have probably got on the plane and gone home. It wasn't my way of coping with that particular problem. The various things that were done for individuals to prepare them and keep them going through the tour were the things that worked.
So with Gower and Botham onside and one test match already in the bag, things were going well for captain Mike Gatting. Time to implement what we're calling his rooming master plan with young Philip Daffy de Freitas.
Philip de Freitas, ex-England cricketer, Leicestershire Academy coach. In 1986, I was on the Ashes tour in Australia.
We put Daffy with Beefy in his first rooming scenario.
I didn't know I was rooming with Ian Botham. I wasn't told. I wasn't pre-warned.
We wanted the young guys to make their own sort of judgments when they were, say, for example, like Daffy, who played in the first test match, to try and give him the ability to be in control.
I think it was when Ian showed me the keys and said to me, you're sharing a room with me. And I thought, oh my God. Wow, my hero, I'm sharing a room, but I was so nervous.
I said to him, look, Beefy's going to come in one night and he's going to put a bottle down, he's going to say drink. And you can turn around and tell Beefy that Gat has told me that if I have a drink with you, I shan't be playing much cricket this tour. And to be fair, Beefy came in, poured a couple of large scotches one night and said, you're having a drink with me. And Daffy turned around and said, no, my captain said I can't, otherwise I might not play much cricket this trip. So we said, oh, really, did he? Put both of them on the top, went to sleep. And they were there in the morning.
It actually happened, I think it was the first night where, he's gone out with, his agent, they've gone for Mill somewhere. And I've fallen asleep. I'm jet lagged. I've fallen asleep, and then suddenly just bang! The doors open, lights are on, a bottle of whiskey, 2 glasses. He's poured, and he just goes, "You're on tour with me now. Come on, drink out." And I'm like, "What?" And I remember the thing that saved me was I must have just, I was so jet lagged and tired. I was just crashed back at, and I think he allowed me to go to sleep. And I remember waking up in that morning, if I remember rightly, I woke up in that morning and those 2 glasses of whiskey and the whiskey was still there. So I survived by not drinking.
It was quite an interesting, story, and the fact that Daffy was strong enough to do that, and Beefy, I suppose, appreciated my thoughts on, what was asked. So it was, again, a nice sort of story that sort of led into the sort of, what I'd say, the beginning of a good, strong team.
Over in the other camp, rooming arrangements are the least of Australia's worries. Strong team? Don't think so. Selected for the second test was Geoff Lawson. A test match too late.
Coming back from the nets at the Gabba on about day 3, I jumped over the dog track, and the greyhound racing track was around the Gabba. Had a fence which was about thigh high, which you had to climb over to go to the nets. I went over on my ankle. It turned out it was broken. I mean, I had a crack in it. I have a photo of a grapefruit-sized swelling on my right ankle. So I didn't do anything for the rest of that test match. I hobbled over to Perth. They said, "You're playing the test, so what are you going to do? You're not going to back out of the test match," particularly as we'd lost the first one. So these days you just don't do that because, A, you want to get paid. That's a big thing. So you weren't getting paid otherwise, and you wanted to play an Ashes test match. But really, physically, I would, not only was the back terrible, but my ankle, it turned out when I had it x-rayed later that it actually had a crack right through the right side of it.
After errors in Brisbane, Captain Allan Border was under even more scrutiny. The job perhaps he never really wanted, hanging by a thread.
I really felt the pressures of that, that I had to perform out in the middle, to sort of assert my captaincy authority, if you like, and that was one way of doing it, lead by example type scenario. But for a couple of years there, I was a bit negative mindset going into these games, and so my leadership was basically lead from the front and score as many runs as I could. So that's basically what I tried to do.
Yeah, and AB, his demeanour doesn't change much. It goes from a bit grumpy to grumpyest. It didn't change much in those days. He had his mind on the job. He knew he had to make runs. He didn't make runs in the first test, but he made up with a few more innings later in the series. But that's how he played. And captain, he led from the front. My job is to make runs. I'll go and do it. It was pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to be chipper. When you've just got your backside handed to you, like in another test match loss. And you get the usual question like, well, how does it feel, Alan? And you say something like, well, how the F do you think it feels? All of a sudden you become Captain Grumpy for some unknown reason. Thankfully I've mellowed since those days, but it took a while for the grumpiness to disappear.
So time for drinks. In Australia, the 12th man's walking out, carrying a tray of something, while I'm getting properly refreshed with a fantastic craft beer sent in the free case from Beer 52, available in our special offer to all Inside the Tour listeners. To claim your case from the world's largest beer club, just visit www.beer52.com/inside and cover the postage of £5.95. Each case has a theme. If you don't like dark beers, just choose the light option. You get a magazine, you get snacks, and you can cancel or pause at any time you like. Right, the players are eyeing up my beer. 12th man off the pitch. Time to resume play. Border needs cheering up. A result, well, just runs will do. They'll come in this second test. But will they be enough? It's the 28th of November, 1986, Perth. The Whacker.
Well, the great thing about the Whacker is it's got stands facing in all different angles and directions and not a lot of cover for the punters who are baking out at square leg and out of cover on the little grass banks there. It's got a fabulous old scoreboard, which is usually done in the colours of the teams that are playing. So if Australia there, their numbers are green and gold. England would be red, white and blue, or white and blue, whatever. Big manual scoreboard, not electronic one. It's a real feature. So yeah, look, it's a unique place.
England pick an unchanged side from Brisbane. Opener Chris Broad bats all day. All day long.
I just go out there and play. Perth was an outstanding pitch, and it really, put the Aussies on the back foot when we put on over 200 for the first wicket. The outfield was exceptionally quick. It's like an upturned saucer where you get the ball past the infield and there's no way that the infield are going to catch the ball before it reaches the boundary. So for me, someone who liked to time the ball, it was just an absolute joy.
Well, I think we figured out pretty early he didn't have many weaknesses. Slips and gullies on Australian wickets to left-handers are usually very, very useful because just that extra bounce will take the ball across the lefty. And he wasn't nicking those. He was leaving a lot of good length balls, and when he wasn't leaving, he was using the middle of the bat, and he hit most of them. So if someone's driving well and hooking and pulling well, you haven't got too many options left.
For Chris Broad, this tour was an extraordinary thing. He started well, never played a full shot, it seemed, and he just loved the way the runs flowed, and it seemed to suit him. So once you get in at Perth, you go big. Border knows that, Chris knew that, and he was in the form of his life. So, you just make the most of it.
Broad is 146 not out by the close of day one. Not a bad day's work. With special supporters in the crowd?
Yeah, my mother and father were there as well, which was nice. I suppose everyone knows me as Stewart's father because I played Test cricket. They probably didn't know my mother and father unless they were with a group of people in the stands and, were proudly saying that that's my son out there. But they wouldn't have necessarily had the adulation that I would have got for Stewart doing so well. But they were still extremely proud of being in the ground and, watching me score my first Test century and sticking it to the Aussies, which is always a good thing from an Englishman's point of view.
Ouch. And the Aussies were feeling that pain all over Perth that night. How's it come to this? We're going to follow on again. And how the hell's Geoff Lawson broken his ankle?
In hindsight, about 10 minutes after the game started, what am I doing here playing? I could hardly walk. My right foot, just to try to get off my weight off the back foot through my bowling action was, every time was painful. Even though I had it strapped up and had painkillers, it was, yeah.
This was shocking. The Australians, led by Allan Border, knew the series was rapidly slipping away.
I had some intel, if you like, about Brody, but nothing quite like he produced in that series. I mean, really important runs from him at the top of the order, and he just had all the answers on our surfaces. He batted so well. When we bowled badly, he took full toll. It was,
Border will play his part in this high-scoring match, but on day two, it's still England in control. Broad makes 162, a mention for Bill Athey, who falls just short of 100 with 96. David Gower's form comes good, a brilliant 136. And then, remarkably, England find a third centurion, the wicketkeeper from Cornwall, making just his second Test match appearance.
My mindset was quite simple. I've had a catch, I've had a stumping, I just have to score a run. Then I've actually competed at Test level.
This is Jack Richards, Surrey in England. Green gloves, floppy hat, a spectator for more than a day. England in charge, but Ian Botham out for a duck. A major blow.
People batting behind Ian Botham sometimes don't have it easy if he's the one that gets out. Because once they've got Beefy out, that's game of match. They're over you like a rash. And you look how many times I had to replace Beefy in that series. So you're suddenly in your mind thinking, hang on, we've done quite well, and then it's gone, gone, gone. Suddenly you're back into something where, hang on, we have to do something here.
And for me, this is where the Jack Richards story gets really interesting, because here you've got this Cornishman who's left his home county to pursue his dream in London, playing for Surrey of playing for England, and now is coming out straight after Ian Botham. I think we sort of project us, the punters, a 2D image. Well, they're wearing an England jumper, an England cap, they're an international cricketer, that they'll be able to cope with it. But actually, elite sportsmen are just the same as us. They are full of frailties and insecurities and worries, particularly at the start of their Test career. And here's Jack Richards, who knows he's been picked for his batting, going out to bat, having made naught in the first Test, and probably thinking, am I actually good enough to be here?
You go through your motions, you do everything you've done as a county player, but now it's sort of My hands didn't necessarily do what I wanted them to do. My feet didn't do exactly what I wanted them to do. And certainly my bat didn't. So in that respect, it was, I don't know if this is Englishness within us, but you've basically achieved what you've always wanted to achieve, and yet you can't really enjoy it because there's so many things going on in between your ears. And of course you come off, and because of this fear of failure, you kick yourself for basically succeeding with your fears, which haunted me a little bit throughout my whole career.
Succeeding with your fears. It's a secret Jack Richards carries to the middle of the whacker. Despite a brilliant wicket-keeping performance, he made a duck in Brisbane. He'd been picked ahead of Bruce French for his extra batting ability, and he'd made naught. The fear of failure. Gower had to help him through.
Perth for me, the whacker for me, was a good place. It'd be an exaggeration to say a second home, but I quite liked Perth. I had a great time there for 4 months, made a stack of runs, so I sort of felt as though playing cricket in WA was my sort of place. And Jack Richards. Jack Richards also got 100 down the order. So it really was a pitch to make runs on, especially if you're seeking a bit of self-validation again. If you're looking for runs, that was a good place to bat.
Fortunately, David Gower being out there, being nice and relaxed, and me being ultra tense and wanting to do well. So my first words, I think, to him was, no matter what you do, you've got to get me off the mark. Got that off the mark. And then, believe it or not, I had a funny feeling that I'd got out in county cricket a lot of time in 13. So then I set myself, I've got to get past 13. So I got past 13 and just continued on my laborious route of monotony, going through the same things at the end of the over, trying to say the same things because it's working well for me. So I said, well, what can we talk about then? They said, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, let's talk about wine. So sometimes in between overs, there might be the idea, well, what do you reckon is a better wine, this or this one? Crazy, unbelievable, but it got me through. You get in the zone, and nothing's going to stop you. Plough on. Plough on.
And on. And on. More than 200 they add for the 6th wicket as Richards moves to the verge of his maiden Test century, the verge of his fears succeeding again, that fear of failure.
So I've got a weakness. So my weakness all through my career is gully. So the thing you're going through your head is not through gully, straight, play straight, not through gully, play straight, play straight. So it's just short of a length, on the up, and what I do? Front foot, off the front foot, on the up, through gully. But fortunately I placed it quite well and it went out. So, but it just goes to show no matter what, you can't, in the heat of the moment, you can try to force yourself, and maybe that's the difference between the really great players and us. I could not stop myself doing anything that was natural. When it was there, I wanted to hit it. It's relief. If you look at one of the few photographs I've got, now you can say that's euphoric. It's not euphoric, it's done my job, got there, done it, let's get on.
Australia are being pummeled again. 3 centuries in the Test match and all to the opposition. They haven't even had a bat yet. Their reply will be critical. This could be the series right here. Step forward, captain, Allan Border.
Allan Border is one of the world's great players. Not the prettiest to watch, but mighty effective, hugely competitive, and very proud as an Australian batsman, and just as proud as an Australian captain. We kind of grew up together in many ways in opposition, but having seen how good he could be, then yes, any team meeting as a preparation for an England versus Australia Test match in that era would involve, well, how do we get AB out? But you end up recognising the fact that this is a very, very good player indeed, and that if he has a good day, he'll be very hard to get out and he will make runs.
Well, I always felt that, as we went into that game, you start off nice and positive about your chances. Then all of a sudden you find yourself, if we don't pass this follow-on, we're in serious strife because, England would have the high ground, probably why, you're sort of carrying like you're almost winning the game, but you're actually just trying to save it. And that's exactly the feeling like, okay, we've saved the game, so we're still in the hunt, 1-0 down, 3 to go type thing. That's how it felt.
Border makes 125. It's a classic, classy, crucial response from an all-time great. Chris Broad and his England teammates can only stand and applaud.
Well, I mean, he was a fantastic player, and I know how delighted he was to avoid the follow-on because, you know, he followed on in the first Test match, and obviously to follow on again in the second Test match would have been hugely disappointing for him on home soil. So he was the one person really that stood between us and a victory in that particular match.
Oh yeah. Very, very important. He was a captain by example, and the example is you make runs. When you get 100 in a Test match, when you're down the series, that's very, very important. It establishes his credibility as the captain, and it also sets an example to the rest of the players. It's got a lot of follow-on effects when the captain makes 100, particularly when you've been struggling. Border was the man to glue it all together in the middle and make the big scores so we could get scores to compete.
It's funny to think that a total of 401, still almost 200 behind on first innings, was enough to save a Test match. But England effectively batted not to lose from there. Mike Gatting admits as much. The match ends drawn. From Western to Southern Australia. Here we go again, another plane to catch. This magical mystery tour continues from Perth to Adelaide.
You know, the fact that we were doing well, having won the first Test match, got a winning draw, if you like, in the second Test match, we were all very confident that things were going to go well. Although, you know, obviously we lost Beefy in the third Test match due to injury, but it didn't seem to affect us as players, or certainly I didn't get that impression from the other players that we'd lost a linchpin, if you like, to us succeeding. And we went out there and played as we would in the previous two Test matches.
Botham's absence means a debut for James Whittaker and extra work for the bowlers. Australia changed wicketkeepers, a debut for Greg Dyer replacing the king of the heckle, Tim Zura. Tim Zura. Now there's a name to conjure with, Francis Edmonds.
He gave it all the chat, you know. I mean, the Australians are good at giving it all the chat, you know, all the sledging and all the chat. So Phil and himself were always having like little sort of digs at one another. So here we go. There was a young glove man. For people who don't know that, that's a wicket keeper. There was a young glove man named Zura, whose keeping got poorer and poorer. Said AB, that was Allan Border, the Australian captain, said AB from first slip, please stop giving such lip, and with extras stop troubling the scorer.
Anyway, back to the cricket. Bat dominated once more at Adelaide. Centuries for David Boon, Mike Gatting, and again for Chris Broad and Allan Border. There's a pattern here. Is Broad enjoying this exalted company?
No, I never really looked at it in those terms. I never compared myself with Allan Border at all. You know, even though the styles are somewhat similar, I would never look and say to myself, you know, I'm on the same level as him. It would have been nice to have played 100-odd Test matches.
2 draws in a row. England still one up in the series, not the greatest Test match if we're really going to be honest, heads skirting around it with limericks. And what's all this about the rest day, Francis?
Adelaide is a fantastic city, the city of churches, but also the centre of wine growing, the wonderful Barossa Valley. And there's a tradition that the rest day was an open invitation by one of the local wine growers to his fantastic vineyard, where a barbecue would be put on, unlimited wine for both teams, Australia and England, and all their respective significant others and all the rest of it. Off we went, charabanc from the hotel. We get there and certainly the wheels fell off fairly quickly. There was a lot of people being thrown into the swimming pool, whether they wanted to go in or not. It was certainly a very, very good day out. I mean, the generosity and the hospitality you get as a touring team is really quite extraordinary. I mean, carnage. Yeah, carnage. All around carnage. That was the rest day.
You think about rest days now. It was like a godsend. You play 3 days of cricket, have a day off, and then come back and finish for the last 2. It was brilliant. Traditionally, we got on very well, Australia, England, even though we'd sort of resume the next day trying to beat the hell out of each other.
Final word on this episode to Jack Richards, that Cornish pirate behind the stumps, living the Ashes dream, living these days in Belgium of all places. Fear of failure he's talked about. 5 of his 8 Test caps came in this series. The challenges, the fears of international sport ultimately stumped him. He retired from cricket at the age of only 30.
I had a lot of pride in what I've done, but I couldn't quite cope with the ups and downs, the anxieties, the waiting for selection, the way they handled the selection and the way they handled things in those days where I felt unprofessional and it affected me. You know, unfortunately, I got dropped for the Nest Text match, which was Old Trafford, which also had the traffic lights in Rotterdam when I heard on the news I'd been dropped. So I do have a lot of great thoughts, a lot of great memories. One thing that is unique, when I went to Cornwall and was down with the Cornish Pirates, a lot of people came out and said they can remember the exact time where they were when I scored that 100. So I'm just pleased I mostly hope I did the Cornish folk a bit of pride by being a Cornishman and doing well for England. I'm known more as an Ashes winner than an English Test cricketer, which puts into perspective how the Ashes has developed itself.
The tour is heading for Christmas, heading for Melbourne, heading for Elton.
People were going to work and the partying was still going.
Elton was there as well, Elton John.
It's just surreal.
So we had EJ the DJ.
Everywhere we went, there was a party given by Elton.
This is Elton John.
Inside the Tour, The Ashes is presented by Mark Pougatch, original music and sound design by Lee Sperry, additional music Dan Compton, produced by Jonathan Overend at 9419 for Audi.